Welcome to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other, as well as tap into various resources into health and finance. But the big part about this show, it's all about athletes transitioning out of sport, which is a major issue today. We interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey and transition out of sports, ultimately into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. So excited today to have Ted Pryor on. How you doing, Ted?
Good. Thanks, Ron. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Ted, I did have an MMA fighter, but Ted is a world champion, a kickboxer, and a three-time world champion. And growing up, played a lot of sports like everybody. In baseball, he was a really good pitcher and was on his way to a scholarship. And then unfortunately kind of got derailed by injury, had a shoulder injury. And that's something we talk about a lot too, Ted, is just, these injuries that happen to these athletes and how they go from there. And then after that, he got into the kickboxing, ultimately being a world champion, did some different things with acting, some other things. And he is the founder of Children America. He was the CEO for many years. And so we're going to talk about growing up playing sports. How did that shape you leading up into everything?
It's kind of interesting. I grew up in Queens, New York. And we had stickball, we had stoop ball, we had Chinese handball. And the boroughs, the kids, if you had a ball, it was always some kind of sports. My legend was Willie Joe Namath, number 12, New York Jets. Only Super Bowl they ever won was with him. And we moved to Florida. My mother had arthritis. We moved to Florida. And, I was an average sports player in New York. But when I came to Florida, I was like the king. I mean, I was the best pitcher. I was the best hitter. I was the best catcher. And, the sports in New York, we played it every day. Stoop ball, stickball, handball. Pensy Pinky was, they used to call the ball, right?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And if you had a Pensy Pinky and you were from New York or you're from the boroughs or you're from New Jersey, you were so much better athlete than the Florida guys because Florida had the beaches and the weather, and we all moved down here for the same thing, the weather, and it gets too hot to play sports. So, what do? They go in the ocean and they play in the beach and they surf and they do water sports. So the athletes were a lot less competitive here, and I really rose to be a great athlete in Florida. And I actually got to the point where, barely made it through high school. But because of my athletic ability of being a great pitcher, the University of Miami picked me up and I got a scholarship. It wasn't on my brains for sure, but it was for my athletic ability. And I tore my rotator cuff. And then you figure your future's laid out for you. And all of a sudden you get hurt and, you're on the sideline. And basically you got to rethink your whole life. And I had to do that. And then I wound up getting into martial arts. And I was like, early age, I think I was 14, 15 when I started, and I dropped it and I just concentrated on baseball. And then I picked it back up in my 17s and wound up becoming a black belt, wound up having a karate school called Hollywood Karate. It was on Pembroke Road in Pembroke Pines, Florida. And I rebuilt my life there to become a world champion kickboxer.
Yeah, that's quite a journey there. And you hit on it there too with that transition. You kind of had to rethink things. And I think that's important with athletes is that you still have a lot of time ahead of you. You can't just when you're done, a lot of people identify themselves as a sport. I'm the kickboxer. I was a runner in high school and college. Football players, whatever it might be, but you have to come up with new strategies with that. So talk about a little bit the education of transitioning out of sports. So let's take it at the level from martial arts and your involvement there. Is there any kind of education out there for these athletes once they're done with that sport?
It's kind of interesting, but it's difficult. Look, it was difficult retiring from being a world champion, right? You always think you can do it. And part of the problem with athletes, and there's a lot of great athletes, but there's very few pro athletes that make a living for it. And there's a big difference between a good athlete and a professional. Someone that makes money, whether it's baseball, football, soccer, martial arts, and they're making a living on it, that's a profession, right? And it's hard to get there. There's very few people are allowed to, are able to be honored to do that. But when you transition out of it, whether you're hurt or whether you're retired, it's a hard thing to do. And it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of guts. And because you don't know what the next journey is going to be. And, you're used to people going, yeah, go Ted, yeah. And people picking up your checks at dinners because you're famous and you're in the paper and you're in the news all the time. And then all of a sudden you're going back to a regular life. And, there's a lot of challenges there for athletes that become professional athletes. And the transition, even when a guy gets hurt and they get forced out, there's really not a lot. There's not like there's therapists out there that help athletes or help them transition. Um, Today they're starting to be a little more sensitive to it, but back in the day, back in my days, in the 80s, 90s, there wasn't really much. Now there's a lot of, there's like football, there's a lot of brain injuries, and there's a
Right.
lot of help from guys getting hit and they're putting new rules, new regulations. MMA fighting, that used to be where it'd be no rules and they were smashing people's heads and they were having, knocking out conscious, getting brain tumors. So rules started protecting them as well. So there wasn't a lot of, it's better now, but it has to get a little bit better even because, people like dedicate their whole lives with their body, and whether it's getting hit, whether it's, pinching a ball or losing your shoulder, they're all major injuries that change your life, and then you have to rebuild your life. So, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of strength. And most professional athletes, I would say 90% of them, don't quote me on the percentage, but are strong enough and if they're strong enough to become a professional athlete, they're strong enough to actually rebuild their life. Not everybody, but I would say the majority of them. They have a strong mindset within them to take that next level. Hope I answered
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think that's, like one of the things that we're trying to do is put together, like from a college perspective, at least like a curriculum and workshops on financial literacy, on mental health, on how to get a job, networking, connecting, marketing yourself, like come up with these different things to help be an additional thing for a school, not only for the current athletes, but for their alumni athletes as well. Because I think a lot of times the alumni athletes tend to get forgotten unless you're some star player. So for them to be able to tap back in, and I think at the same level, I've talked to people that are former NFL players and Major League Baseball players, and they talk a little about the Players Association, the alumni, and all that. And I think all of it's getting better, and it needs to continue to get better because I think education is so important to help these struggling athletes.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about networking, connecting. And this is such an important thing. Talk about the importance of doing it while you're still playing your sport and relevant.
Well, the networking is when you're in the sports. Well, my limelight, I've had I have a book coming out now, as I think you're aware of, three-time world champ, and my networking when I was in a sports arena was a little bit different than most because I had basically different lives. I had, I was a tactical commander, and I used to train the police department, DEA, FBI, Secret Service. I used to teach all the law enforcement, safety and procedures on self-defense for themselves, how to cuff somebody, how to put someone in a chokehold without killing them. So I was a martial arts expert, and with Joe Hess, we were the tactical commanders in West Palm Beach, and we wound up going all the way up to DEA, Secret Service, FBI, and we trained all these guys. And at the same time, I had a different life. By no one ever knew it, but I was actually running marijuana back and forth from Naples to Hollywood, Florida, in my part time. And then I was also a professional athlete, fighting for the world title. So I had a lot of outlets and a lot of different people that knew about me, and the socialism, the social acts of, I had police officers, I had drug smugglers, I had people that didn't know what I was doing. I had college friends, and they're saying, what you're doing great, and no one knew the whole real story except me. So me having a social background with my athletic sports was one side of the fence, and then there was another side of the fence. So they were kind of encumbered, all of them. They were shocking when I finally got in trouble.
I can imagine it, but like you said, I mean, you had this group that kind of networking in the community. I think a lot of people we encourage. I mean, even starting in high school, we talk about high school athletes. I mean, obviously they're their teammates and their parents, and then if you do end up playing college sports or being in college, you've got that group. But regardless, I think I've talked to some agents, and they say that the biggest failure to some of these athletes is that they don't do it while they're playing. And so all of a sudden, when they're done, they're kind of like, okay, where's my six-figure job? And like, well, you didn't build those relationships, and it's not there for you.
Yeah, yeah. The relationships are really very, very important, and because you never know if you're going to make it or not. And if you look at the percentages of a baseball player, there's like like a 0.5% that actually make it. There's only less than 500 pro baseball players in the country. So, it's a real tough job to get, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about alumni engagement. A lot of times when you're talking from a college perspective, I mean, there's alumni groups and all that, and they'll bring athletes back, for that golf tournament, but it doesn't seem like they're bringing them back like from a mentoring perspective and all that. Is there in the MMA world, is there kind of an alumni community of former athletes like yourself that kind of come back and maybe mentor some of the today's athletes?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, but like the MMA, that is what it is now. MMA really is a sport that's created because boxing was no longer, wrestling was no longer, and the only thing that actually was in the Olympics was judo. To give everybody a little bit of a history about the martial arts is karate, it's jiu-jitsu, which is used to be judo, but now it's a fancier name. It's called jiu-jitsu, and they had full contact karate first. Then they had kickboxing second, which is what I was in. Basically, I started in '78. My first fight was in Nassau Coliseum. Chuck Norris was the head referee, and I was fighting my first fight against Teddy Wong, who's Bruce Lee's student, and Chuck,
Wow.
heavyweight champion of the world, who was my trainer. So it goes back to, and it was full contact karate. There were 3-round fights. Then that became kickboxing. And then kickboxing was really big in the '70s and '80s. And then it kind of faded out in the '90s. And then in the 2000s, the Petita brothers came in and they started martial arts. And the martial arts was basically MMA fighting, which it had wrestling, it has judo, it has boxing, it has kickboxing. So we put them all together, and basically it became this $4 billion industry. And so that industry all started from martial arts, and martial arts all came from Korea, from Japan, Okinawa, and came into this country. And martial arts probably are some of the biggest population of sports in the world, associated with it. And I think their support system, in which your question was asked, is when you're a teacher, you're called a sensei.
Right.
Now, when you get a little older, I'm 66. I'm a grandmaster, and I've been in the sport since I was, 13 years old. So I'm a grandmaster. So a lot of your students look after senseis, grandmasters for help, guidance, and it's a very good community. And it's a community of, martial arts is good for your children because it teaches them respect. It teaches them how to bow. It teaches them how to respect their teacher, their students, not to be a bully, to use it as self-defense. And there's a real good connection of community with martial arts. But for the most part, other sports, my experience, like baseball, like when I was done my rotator cuff, I mean, all my friends were gone. Because I wasn't that baseball guy anymore. There was no guidance. There was no one saying, "Hey, Ted, how are you? You know, are you doing well?" There was no support at all. But there's a lot of support in the martial arts world, which I think is good. And you know, uh, like I'm going to an event tomorrow. Fix and Flex, and it's in Broward County. It's a big martial arts thing, and I'm promoting my book, Three-Time World Champ. And there's a lot of people that I haven't seen in decades because I've been out of the martial arts world since 1990. But they all still know me. They still want to recognize me. They want to give me awards, and because there's still unity and the children. It's all about the kids. And it's all about teaching. And so the martial arts world has a good connection, I believe, but other sports really don't. To answer your question, and I hope it was too not.
No, it was good, and I think it's interesting because I was having a conversation the other day just about that. Is I think there's that athlete skill set, the DNA that's regardless of what sport. I think a lot of athletes are the same, and we were talking about just cross collaboration, like you were just saying. Like you don't really see. I mean, you might see like NBA players and Major League Baseball players, kind of top echelon, like getting together and going to games or whatever. But for the most part, you don't see that interaction between sports from an alumni perspective, and I think that's something that's needed because I think again, whether you play baseball, football, soccer, wrestling, MMA, you still have that same makeup.
Yeah, it's important to let people know that he was once that, and he's a nostalgia now, and he's a mentor and someone to look up to. Like they never got why Pete Rose never got into the Hall of Fame. We know he had a problem, but his ability and what he's done and his record, they should have honored that and concentrated on his record instead of what he did wrong. He made a mistake. Okay, don't crucify him. What about all the good he did for baseball? And you need to unite, and you need to really keep those legends around to let people know to try to be like that legend. It's very important, and I think the sports industry, like you said, they need a little bit more support on more so people getting hurt, because it's a mental illness, because you're set on becoming a pro baseball player, and you have your whole career laid out on you, and you get hurt, and all of a sudden you're off the team and nobody knows about you anymore. So there's a lot of tough calls there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I always ask this question. This will probably maybe just be, well, it might be two questions, but what advice, and we're at 10 words or less, so we're not going to be, what advice would you give to Ted as he was getting ready to go into college and that injury happened? Looking back, what advice would you give?
Well, it's real simple. I always, my motto is think, be, do. And, I was thinking, I was being it, and I was doing it, and I got hurt. And I never been on my back. And I've always fought to no matter what diversity I had, and I would make a comeback. And I said, I want to be a professional something, and I'm not going to quit. And I pivoted to martial arts. And all I can say is one thing is never, ever stop focusing on your dream. Because if you dream it, you think, be, do, you'll do it. And here I am, proof to say that, I was never on my back. And 65-5, I only lost 5 fights, but then I won 65 in a row and never lost again. Became a world champion, became a world champion businessman, and I was a world champion pot smuggler. So I all three.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about your ultimately your transition out of being a world champion kickboxer into the corporate world.
Well,
Just kind of how that was. Just like all of a sudden you've been this athlete, professional athlete. Now it's time to kind of hang it up, so to speak, and do your next journey.
The thing about it is when I was in martial arts, I had a karate school, Hollywood Karate, and obviously we teach children, and I've always been attracted to teaching children and helping them, and from 5 years old all the way up, and they became black belts, and I got into really just helping children was my motto, and then unfortunately I got in a little trouble. I had to do a little jail time, came out, and basically had some self-service car washes, and then I basically got into the childcare industry, which is Tutor Time was my first experience. I bought into that company. It was a franchise owned by Michael Weissman and Richard, and I started getting into the childcare business, and we started taking care of children, and I just realized that this is what I want to do. Is I want to reform and help children, and the biggest thing that I think I can contribute in Children of America is that 35 to 40% of our children are underprivileged children. And I was that child that was left behind. I got left back in first grade 3 times. The only reason I got to second grade because I didn't fit in the desk. And, I had ADHD, I had all those things before they even had names. And it wasn't that I was lazy. I was just, I wasn't a fast learner. And so I was that kid left behind. And so I created this company, Children of America. And, 40% of the money that we make, we give back to the government to get children that can't afford it an opportunity. And my whole thing in life since 1989 or 1991, I guess it was, is giving back to children and trying to get them to be having an education that the privileged children have. I don't want anybody to be left behind. That's my model, and that's how I grew this company. That's how I think of life, and it all begins with children.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's what's the model? So are there different locations around the country, and how does that work?
Yes, I'm a corporate child care provider. We had right now we currently have about 65 locations. We're in about 18 states. They hold about, depending on the state, but I would say our normal enrollment is about 200 children per location. We take kids from 6 weeks old to 12 years old, and it's an educational child care center. It's not a babysitting service. We actually have a good curriculum. We have, we track the children that go to our centers all the way to college. We have about a 96% rate of children that come to us go to college and actually finish college. So it's an educational child care base, and very proud of what we're doing. And my son runs the company now. He's doing a fantastic job. I give him a little advice when he asks me, not too much, but he does ask me once in a while. I keep him out of trouble. I hope it's a a tough industry because the parents come in and both parents are working. They drop their child off, and we're with that child all day. We have broccoli, we have fresh chicken. We don't have all packaged food. We have really healthy food for the children. Some of the best meals that they have are at our center. And then we have before and after school, and they get out. If they're in a B&A program, they're 10 or 12 years old. They come over and we do their homework with them. So when the parent picks them up, all we expect them to do is we have a Bentley book, and it's to connect the mother and the father with the child to read about that book, the Bentley book, and talk about little James and Michael and his two friends are in the book, and they're reading the book to their parents, and they're happy because their name's in the book, and they created an art graph in it. So that unites the parents, and it's been a real good helping tool because the parents before that, they drop their kids off and, they're exhausted. They're working and they take them home and they know their homework's done, and they're losing that connection of having a little school with your parents. So the Bentley book kind of brings them together to get them to read a small little book together before they go to bed at night. And that's made a big difference in the parenting and the children's lives as well.
How does the book change each week or each day? Like, how does that?
Every month is a different edition, and it rotates we have 65 schools, and we usually open up about 5 schools a year. Because of the inflation and everything, we've slowed down. We're probably going to open up 2 this year because of the expense. But what we do is we rotate it out of the 65 schools. Every school gets a chance to highlight, and the children get to draft something. They get to write something. They get to be very creative thinking, and they do it on their own. They draw on their own, and whatever they draw, we put it in. We don't. There's no good. There's no bad. There's no judgment, and every child gets to light up once a month, and we work through all the children, and they all get to be in the book. And then at the end of the year, we have a summit, and they pick 5 families. And if the topic is China or the topic is Paris, at the end of the year, we do a raffle, and we send 2 families away with our best teachers to go away for a week to discover that place that they talked about all year long. So it's kind of neat. They actually get to create it, and then they get to go see the place that won the award where they're going to go visit.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. It's a great trip. So let's talk a little bit. I want to get into the athlete DNA, the skill set, and we kind of talked a little bit about that from a leadership perspective and hiring people and all that. Talk about hiring athletes and just what companies you're looking for there.
Actually, I haven't really had an opportunity to hire. Well, that's not true. I have hired just recently. My son's homeschooled. He's 9 years old, and I live in California. And the public school system is really broken. If people don't know it, it's not really a good situation. There's no such thing as failing anymore. They pass everybody, whether you can read, write, or spell. You're going to the next class, and there's no judgment. Good, maybe bad. It's not a good policy. But I have a gentleman, and I have 2 school teachers. I have a young lady that's a school teacher, and I also have a young man that's a school teacher, and they rotate week to week. And he was a professional baseball player and got hurt. And his degree was teaching. His name's Matt. Nice guy. His qualifications, when I read his qualifications, being in the education department and being in childcare and knowing a little bit about education and about what I'm looking for. The gal was, she was a perfect teacher. I hired her off the bat, had a great resume. And I sat down with this guy, and I'm looking at his resume. And I'm like going, Matt, you don't have the best resume. I go, but you got to tell me about, you being a baseball player, becoming a pro. And I go, tell me about that. Tell me about your experience. And he went through his whole thing about, he got drafted by the Angels, and he had a knee injury, and he had a pivot, and it was really hard for him to pivot, but he came back to something that he loved, which is he loved teaching. He didn't realize he loved teaching. And now this guy's sitting in front of me. I go, you don't have the best resume. I already hired this teacher that it's in my mind. I go, but now I'm going to hire you too. He goes, but you already hired someone. I go, I'm going to have both of you because my son's going to get a little bit of the athletic part of you and your desire and you're not losing attitude to being a winner. You pivoted and you came to something that you know that you love this just as much as you did sports and you're able to transition. That's courage. I need my son to know about courage and I needed my son to know about a great teacher. So I hired both of them and they split the responsibility. And it's been about 2 months now. And it's probably, my wife says, the best decision we've ever made. And what really inspired me about Matt was his resume kind of sucked actually as a teacher, but his experience from being a pro baseball player to pivoting back to a teacher and not looking back and not feeling sorry for himself and taking all that knowledge and courage and turning it into becoming a school teacher and his experience with children, I thought was amazing. It was a really good fit. So that was, that's one of the most spectacular stories that I've heard as an athlete that I admire the guy. And it wasn't because he had a great resume. It's just because he had things there that I can touch and feel about. He got hurt and he never stopped. He never quit and he moved on and he really is a champion within himself.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because even talking to some of these athletes when they're in college, they're not getting the opportunity necessarily to do the internships and things like that. So when they are coming out and they're done with their sport, if they're not, fortunate to play professional, even if they are, but still, is that when they're looking at the resume, there's not a lot on there because they're playing sports the whole time. But what you just brought up is so key that, those skills that they have. I bring this up quite a lot on these podcasts. I was talking to one guy, he was a college football player and ultimately CEO of several large companies. And he implored athletes like, look, you're not done. When it's over with the sport, you got a lot to offer and people want to hire you. So it's a good lesson. What you just brought up is that, regardless of what occupation, they have something for sure to offer.
Well, like I said, there's very, very few people that make money in sports. If you think about it, no matter what sport it is, whether it's wrestling, baseball, football, soccer, martial arts, uh, boxing, there's very, very few professionals that get paid to get to say, I get to work every day, something I enjoy to do. And they go work out and, they get paid for it. Very few. And if they can do that, they can do anything transitional in the workplace because it takes so much hard work and desire to be a pro. Any athlete that's a pro, they can do anything like you said. There's no question about it. There's very, very few people can do what they do. And they have the courage and the knowing where to help. They have the mindset that they can focus and they can accomplish anything.
Yeah, no, for sure. So let's wrap this up. You've got this book coming out. So let's do a little promotion of the book. Talk about the book a little bit and ultimately how people can find you.
Okay, great. Well, it's 3-time world champ and basically gives you a whole background of my life. I was three-time world champ kickboxing. Won the title, had it for three times I defended it, and then I became a pot smuggler, and just happened to be one of the largest seizures in United States history. 32,000 pounds, 1981. I'll never forget it. I got pulled over, and then they found 32,000 pounds in the warehouse. And I was actually working at the police department at the time, and the guys that pulled me over were friends, and they said, "Oh my God, it's Ted Pryor, it's Joe Hess's boy. Because this is our teacher. He's dangerous. You got to watch him. His feet shackled." So I had a bad experience, and then I became a icon businessman working with Children of America in the child care educational business. And people say, how do you do all this? I have no idea. All I know is that I've never been knocked down. I've never been on my back, and I've never quit. And my lowest time was being in jail for 2 years. And I said to myself, I know the prosecutors, I know the Secret Service, I know all my friends in the police department. They're all betting on me, but they're all thinking that I'll never go straight. And I proved them all wrong. And I came out of there with a winning attitude, never looked back, always focused on what I wanted to do, what I wanted to accomplish. And here I am today. And my book is very exciting. I'm going on Joe Rogan soon. I'm going on Sean Hannity. I'm going on a bunch of podcast shows with yours show, which is, thank you for inviting me on. But the book is very exciting. It's true. And it shows character. It shows never quitting, never looking back. And I hope you'll enjoy it. It's three-time world champ, and it's by me. And now I'm an author, and I can't believe it. It took me 3 years to do it, but I was inspired by a good friend of mine, Jordan Zimmerman, to do that, and I did it. And we have some guys moving around, possibly doing a movie for us, maybe Spielberg and Oliver Stone's looking at it. So it's very exciting. I'm doing a book show Saturday and Sunday at the convention center this weekend. It's called Fit and Flex. It's a big event. You get a chance, stop by, and I'll give you an autographed book. And it's discounted by, it's only $20. It's going to be on Amazon. You can buy it now for, I think, $28. So it's a little bit of discount. So come over and see me, and I'll get you a book signed for you.
Have you done is there going to be an Audible or audio version as well?
There actually is. I sent you, I think I sent you an audio version, and the audio version is kind of cool because his name's Joe Scabelli, but he sounds like Joe Pesci a lot.
So he plays you?
He's just narrating me. And on the movie side of it, Gotland Julian, Ryan Gotland, he's the guy that I'd want to pick for me to be my character. But I think Oliver Stone is probably going to pick up the movie and run with it. So we feel pretty confident on that. We've gotten a lot of thumbs up from him, and he really likes the story. And there's many, many multiple stories in here, good, bad, and the ugly, I should say. But it wound up being, at the end of the book, I'm blessed to be alive. I'm blessed to be here, and I'm totally blessed to be able to share my goods and bads and let people know that never, ever stop believing in yourself, and you can do anything if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. And so how can people find you?
They can find me on Amazon, also Instagram, Ted Pryor at Ted Pryor Kickboxing, Instagram. I've never been on it, but now that I have my book out, I have a marketing agency, and we're doing all kinds of stuff on Instagram. And so if you want to follow, you can follow there. And I think it'll be a great success. And all the people from Florida, I live in California now. I was also in the movie business a little bit. I produced some movies as well in the 90s. Yeah, I think you go to Instagram.com, Ted Pryor, and look up, and I think you'll see some exciting stuff on there.
That's great. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. And this podcast is on our Alumni Direct YouTube channel, as well as across all the different podcast networks. And we encourage people to watch and listen. We really want to grow the following here because I think there's such a great message. Every episode I come back, and especially when I'm editing the episodes that later, just listening to some of the advice that like Ted gave today and other athletes as well. So, make sure to tune into Athletes, Entrepreneurs, Alumni Journey. And thanks again, Ted.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. Bye, Rob.
You're welcome.